Well, my clock says 9 o'clock. Good morning, avocado growers. We're going to cover avocado disease today. I, Ben Faber, will do an overview. And then Dakota Camino from Syngenta is going to talk specifically about the newly registered fungicide called Orondis. And you can ask questions all during this session. Leah Boyd and Sausen Knobel will be monitoring the chat room and the question and answer categories. And as those questions come up, feel free to ask them. We have 1 unit of DPR credits, and you can attain those at the very end by answering a questionnaire that will be put up in the chat box. Sosin will post that in the chat. So you can either post your questions in the question and answer box or in the chat box. So we'd like to thank our sponsors, the foundational sponsors that are sponsoring these whole sessions of presentations by the California Avocado Society, the California Avocado Commission, and the University of California. Foundational sponsors are Calavo, Westpac, Index Fresh, Delray Avocado, Rocan Nursery, Westphalia Fruit, Mission Produce, Farm Credit West, Nutrien Ag Solutions, and American Ag Credit. And Giamara and Wilbur Ellis and Westbridge are specifically sponsoring this disease symposium. So with that, I'll load my presentation and we'll get going. Again, feel free to ask questions as they come up during the presentation. So we're going to be talking about avocado diseases. And a key is, fortunately, this is not, well, I don't know. This is not India. This is not New Zealand. This is not a place with a lot of rain. So many of our diseases are fairly minor. They're, unless they happen to be in your grove. Really, the only major disease that we've got is avocado root rot. Now, we'll cover some of these minor diseases and what one can do to control them. So disease. So it takes time for disease to appear. You have to have the right environment. And when I said this is not New Zealand, I don't want to put New Zealand down by any means, but they get a lot of rain. And so they have a lot of fruit diseases. And so that becomes a predisposing condition for disease in their case. You have to have the host, in this case, we're talking about avocados. And then you have to have the pathogen. And, a lot of pathogens are episodic, they come and go. Turns out avocado root rot, Phytophthora cinnamomi, is just about everywhere we grow avocados. And so we have these predisposing situations that are brought on by the biology, as well as abiotic stresses. And when I talk about abiotic, I'm talking about salinity, lack of water, too much water, freezing, heat spells, insects, pruning, a heavy crop load. Any stress is going to predispose plants and animals to disease. So you have to identify what these stresses are and try and alleviate them as much as possible. So I kind of classified things by disease as primary pathogens and secondary pathogens. The primary pathogen is one that is like root rot. It kills you outright. And then secondary pathogens they kind of hang around. You can often turn around a secondary pathogen. And luckily, most of the diseases that we have here in California are secondary pathogens. I also categorize them as chronic. You can live with it, or catastrophic, where you get a sudden collapse of the tree. And some, diseases like verticillium wilt are just boom, you know, it's pretty amazing. But usually verticillium doesn't kill mature trees. It, you know, it clogs the water carrying xylem, and oftentimes with the defoliation, it's sunburn that kills the tree. And then there's a disease in Florida called laurel wilt, which is a primary pathogen. It kills outright. It's catastrophic. The tree can be living and healthy, and a month later it can be dead. Fortunately, we don't have laurel wilt in this state. So, minor disease, anthracnose. You get these brown blotches on leaves. It's can be a problem when we get 50 inches of rainfall, though. It's caused by Colototricum. It's a fungus that is everywhere in our orchards, but it's not normally a problem. It's really a decay fungus. And when you get moisture with rain, or I saw it once in San Luis Obispo where they had overhead sprinklers, and they had pretty rampant Colototricum in the trees. Spores germinate, they penetrate the fruit, and it's not normally a problem when it's on leaves, but when it gets in the fruit, it can be a problem. When we do have rain, the copper sprays will help control it. It's really the only material that we've got that's registered, as far as I know, to control anthracnose. Avocado black streak. This is a Botryosphaeria. It's pretty darn dramatic. We, for many years, didn't know what caused it. And Keith Eskelin, who was the avocado plant pathologist, finally identified it with PCR analysis. Guatemalan trees, varieties tend to be most susceptible. It's only been found in California. It's never been reported in any other avocado growing area. And it's characterized by the sugar exudates, the white spots that you see going up and down the branches. These are just shallow lesions. I've never seen a tree die from it. It can be quite chronic. It can show up as chlorotic leaves. You can see leaf blotching. Could identify it as a zinc deficiency with small leaves, with bunchy growth. This is a water stress disease. As soon as you relieve the water stress, it goes away. And when we have salinity, when we have these 4 inches of rain years where the irrigation is insufficient, or you have poor distribution uniformity, this can be quite something. Again, it's a Botryosphaeria, as we'll see as this talk goes on. Botryosphaerias are pretty darn prominent because they are in the orchard. Botryosphaerias are decay fungi that are decaying all the leaf litter that's in an orchard. And avocados have a lot of leaf litter. And if they don't have the leaf litter, that means you've got a problem, because a healthy tree is always going to have leaf litter. Dothiorella, stem and leaf blight. This is a Botryosphaeria as well. And John Mengi first came out when he had switched from citrus to working on avocado. He said, "What is that? It looks like salt and pepper syndrome." So he named it salt and pepper syndrome. And I reminded him of it about 10 years ago. And he said, "I never named it that." Anyway, this is a Botryosphaeria. It's, you'll see, splotches of dying tissue. And these Botryosphaerias just don't kill mature trees, but as you can see here, they start at the terminal, and on a young tree, they can completely defoliate, a newly planted tree. And oftentimes you'll see this pop up after a heat spell. So you've been behind your irrigation and weren't keeping up with it, and the tree runs out of water. Okay, this is another Botryosphaeria. This is called stem blight, and this can show up on just about any part of the tree, on the trunk, on the branches. It's often confused with black streak, and it's caused by the same disease organism. And you know, again, when you have these blights, as soon as you relieve the heat, irrigation, lack of rain, salinity management, as soon as that's corrected, these symptoms will disappear. Not immediately, but in a few months. Branch canker is favored by moisture. You want to keep leaves away from the trunk. You want to keep water off the trunk. Guatemalan varieties like CAS and reed are more susceptible. Avocado bacterial canker. This is caused by a bacteria, not a fungus. And it's characterized by these silver dollar-sized white exudates. And as this heals, you'll get this little flap of bark. And just below that, there's a pocket of liquid. This is again, another one of these diseases that caused by water stress or salt stress. As soon as you relieve it, it goes away. This, though, is a Phytophthora trunk canker. This is probably the second most important disease in coastal California. I think the hot spot is this Highway 118 stretch in Ventura. I've seen it in San Diego and San Luis Obispo, but it tends to be in areas where we get high humidity, we get fog, and it will appear on the side that is either getting hit by sprinklers or it's on the side where it doesn't dry out very well. There's a wide host range. It goes to walnuts and cherries and cherimoyas. And it only occurs at the base of the tree. It happens within about 18 inches of the ground. And slowly it consumes the tree until it girdles the tree and then it dies. But this is a disease that is not, it's very slow growing. And I haven't seen a label on Orondis for treating it, but this is a Phytophthora. It responds really well to phosphorus acid. Maybe Dakota can tell us later on whether Phytophthora mengii is on the label for Orondis. And this is how trunk canker shows up. It's where water is on the tree, or it's on the north side where fog accumulates. This is called crown rot or trunk canker. And it used to be called Phytophthora citricula until it was renamed in honor of John Menghi. Trunk canker is caused by Phytophthora mengii. You get the first exudate is white, and then you'll get a bacteria living off that sugar exudate, and it turns kind of red. And if you dig down, you'll find that the cambium has been killed. And again, if you treat it fairly rapidly and consistently with phosphorus acid, it'll clear up. But first, you got to relieve the water stress. And you know, when I say fog can cause it, you want to have some good air circulation inside the canopy. So pruning is helpful too. Okay, Phytophthora fruit rot. This usually happens to low-hanging fruit. It can be either Phytophthora mengii or Phytophthora cinnamomum. It's usually fruit that's been dragging on the tree. When we have rainfall, it can kind of stair step, ladder up in a tree. It'll start at the base and then splash spores onto the next highest fruit and work its way up the tree. So you want to make sure that, again, irrigation water is not hitting the canopy. And watch out for when it rains. You can get very distinct circular black spots with Phytophthora fruit rot. So one way to deal with it is just to get fruit off the ground by skirt pruning the trees. Dithyarella fruit rot. Dithyarella is a Batrasphaeria. And it's, again, Batrasphaerias are fungi that are decaying all the dead tissue that's in an orchard. And this can ladder up a tree as well, the way Phytophthora does. Dithyarella fruit rot, the flesh becomes invaded. It'll start smelling. Usually it's a stem end rot that starts where the water collects. And it's growing on the dead branches. So this is another reason for pruning a tree, is to get the dead tissue out of the canopy so that these Batrasphaerias don't move on to the fruit. Sun blotch. Sun blotch is a viroid. It's more simple than even a virus. You can see these white or yellow scars on fruit. You can see it on the leaves. You can see bunchy leaves. You can see a weepy growth habit. I've only seen all 4 of the symptoms once. Normally you'll see it just on the fruit, or you'll see it on the leaves. In some cases, you actually increase fruit set. There's one grower I know in Carpinteria who didn't want to cut out his trees because he got a lot of fruit, even though some of it was scarred. He said it wasn't bad enough to take the tree out. But you really do want to remove the trees, because this can easily spread from one tree to another through root grafting. So oftentimes you'll see that there's one tree that has most pronounced symptoms, and then you'll see the 4 surrounding trees starting to show it. And so it can actually spread pretty fast in a mature orchard. Verticillium wilt. This is a fungus that clogs the vascular tissue. It's very dramatic. You'll often see it showing up after a heat spell, on a weekend. I mean, the whole tree goes down, or sometimes just one branch. It's caused by a fungus, Verticillium alboatrum. And it's usually will go through the winter, and then the first warm day of the spring, boom, it goes down. Verticillium is promoted on tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, all the solanaceous plants. And if you have these growing out in the orchard, it's best to remove them. In a mature tree, for example, this tree here is about 5 years old. Usually it's the collapse can be turned around by whitewashing it, because again, sunburn typically is what kills a tree. So when you have all this wood exposed that had been shaded, it's the sunburn that will kill the tree. It will kill young trees outright, though. 1 year old, 2 year old. So whitewash, whitewash, whitewash. All the major limbs, you want to make sure it's white. There are special whitewash products available for organic growers, or you can use just a white interior latex paint diluted 50% with water. Or, if you have a really thick one, you could actually put it in more water. Traditionally, people used hydrated lime and zinc sulfate in water. Kaolin clay can work. But you got to make sure that you have white. Some people will just put a dusting on, and you've got to reflect all this sun that's would be coming in to sunburn the tree. Armillaria root rot. Interestingly, avocados are less susceptible to armillaria than, say, citrus. Oftentimes, you can go back in with avocados after your lemons have died from armillaria. Armillaria in avocados is slow moving. It takes out the larger pieces of roots. It is very sensitive to drying out. So normally it's the crown roots and the trunk that is affected. The top 18 inches, if you pull back the bark, you'll see this white mycelium there. Oftentimes, you can just expose the crown roots and help dry out the roots, and it will kill the armillaria. Armillaria is actually pretty sensitive to other fungi. It's parasitized by other fungi. Oftentimes you'll see trichoderma growing on it. It's a kind of greenish blue fungus that will colonize the armillaria, actually. Okay, Phytophthora cinnamomi. This is the sad-looking tree. Tristeza is what it's called in Mexico. It's the most serious disease, not only in California, but worldwide. It actually thrives on excess soil moisture and poor drainage. And so it starts off with the canopy thinning, smaller yellow leaves. You'll see wilting. It's widespread. We've spread avocados all over the world, and we've spread Phytophthora cinnamomi with it. So just about anywhere avocados are grown, you'll find it. So one of the first symptoms is no leaf mulch. You see the thinning canopy, because it doesn't have energy to make leaves. You won't find leaves at the base of the tree. And the wind blows through because now the canopy is thinning, and so everything's exposed to wind. So one of the first signs of Phytophthora cinnamomi is a thinning canopy. And then you'll start seeing sunburn damage to fruit. And this is, you see small, numerous fruit oftentimes. It's like the last gas the tree is going through to propagate itself. And you can see that, it's still edible fruit, but you can't sell it. Okay, so the small feeder roots are absent, or if you find them, they're black and brittle and dead. And the lack of the feeder roots prevents the uptake of moisture. So the soil often stays wetter in Phytophthora trees. And this starts this cycle where you're losing leaves that can't pump water out of the soil. You're losing roots that can't absorb water in the soil. So oftentimes you'll see it's wetter and the leaves are wilting. And what's the first thing a grower does when they see wilt? Well, they put water on, and this exacerbates the situation. Trees can die pretty darn rapidly. In some cases, 3 months. It's really more of a chronic. It's not catastrophic the way verticillium wilt is, or black streak. It can be spread in the grove by water and runoff, or people walking around. The first pick that you do, and you bring labor in and bins, it's quite likely you're bringing in inoculum, Phytophthora inoculum. So here's the different stages of avocado root rot. As the canopy thins, you finally get this staghorning effect before the tree dies. And this again is a situation where when you start losing the leaves, you don't have sunburn protection, and the sunburn is going to exacerbate the disease. So you start digging around, and Phytophthora cinnamomum goes after smaller roots. So you'll often find some larger roots, or you won't find any roots at all. And so it's this cycle of, with no roots, you don't have water uptake, no water uptake, you get a sad looking tree. And it looks like drought. So a lot of people, oddly, thinking that it's wilt and lack of water, they'll put more water on. So the small feeder roots are absent, prevents the uptake of water from the soil, and so it often stays wetter under Phytophthora trees. So this is just to indicate, this is a site where you can see healthy trees to the left and dead trees in the foreground. These are two different owners, and so there's obviously Phytophthora in the healthy looking trees, but they're healthy. And it goes back to proper water management, getting the right amount on at the right time. And lack of water and salinity is just going to exacerbate the stress that the tree sees. So it's not just putting on too much water, it can be lack of water as well. So one of the things is Phytophthora cinnamomum is not a fungus, it's a brown algae. And the distinguishing character is that algae have got cellulose in their bodies, not chitin the way fungi have. And so this is how we deal with Phytophthora. We mulch. Lack of mulch is a death sentence for avocados. So the thing that decomposes the Botryopspherias that decomposes mulch, and all the other fungi that are in there, are breaking down cellulose. And so because algae, Phytophthora have got cellulose in their cell walls, their presence is made harder for them to survive because of all these enzymes out there decomposing the mulch. So here's one of the fungi. This is fire fang. It is actually going to be chewing up Phytophthora at the same time as it's decomposing mulch. And is there a problem with eucalyptus? It is an excellent source of mulch. Some people are afraid to use it because of allelopathy. This is an antagonism on the it's thought eucalyptus had because of the strong odor. But eucalyptus is actually an excellent mulch. Okay, how do you control root rot? Well, careful irrigation. If you can identify a block of trees that you can put a different irrigation system on, or put on smaller emitters, or it becomes an issue of not just putting the amount of water on, but the timing of the application. So you want to control gophers because the water is going to move more rapidly through the runs. You want to put up some barriers to reduce the movement of animals. You can't stop coyotes completely, but it'll help reduce the spread of the inoculum. And if it comes down to it, remove the avocados and replant with cherimoyas or persimmons or citrus or some other plant that doesn't get Phytophthora cinnamomum. Using clonal rootstock. So there are some good rootstocks out there. Even Duke 7, which was the first clonal rootstock that came out in the late 70s, is still a good rootstock, especially if you can improve the irrigation and use a material like Orondis or phosphorus acid. But there are variations in their tolerance of Phytophthora. Phosphorus acid injection works, but it won't eradicate Phytophthora. The buffered material is best. The straight acid can not only harm trees, but harm any applicator. And so we've got recommendations about the rates that can be used. This is the kind of damage you can see when you're using the straight acid. And this is injected trees that are unaffected if you're using a buffered material. And so this is the kind of thing that you see after injections, or this can be applied through the irrigation as well, or it can be applied as a foliar. Foliars need to be timed to when leaves are fully expanded but not hardened off. So running it through the irrigation is very effective. It's easy to do. It's not as effective as a trunk injection though. And so this is what the tree looks like. This is no roots when you don't have the phosphorus acid material. So to do phos acid, you need to be aware of the growth cycles. So the brown line is root growth, and you see most of the root growth occurring midsummer, spring, going into the autumn. And you see a real decline in the wintertime. Phosphorus acid is not a fungicide, it's a fungostat. It acts on the tree to improve the tree's resistance to Phytophthora. It is not a fungicide. It's got to be applied to a growing root system that it can protect. So one of the things as well is that you have to be aware of temperatures. So cool temperatures are not conducive to root growth, and they're not conducive to the use of phos acid. And it turns out that the optimum temperatures for the avocado are slightly higher than for the Phytophthora. So a cooler soil is really promotes Phytophthora. In fact, a lot of times, if you go into an orchard and you start digging around in the wintertime, there's kind of a background level of Phytophthora that exists, and it's sometimes it's really difficult to find white roots at all, and it's not until the temperatures warm up that you start seeing root growth. So phos acid application should occur in the period of root growth, and that's usually in the summer and fall. So how do you treat root rot? Well, mulch, gypsum helps. Gypsum reduces the motility of Phytophthora. Planting in mounds improves drainage, and then using clonal rootstocks. So it's a combination of all those things plus the use of phos acid, or in this case, Orondis. So we've got these true fungicides, metalaxyl methanoxum, which is rhydimal gold. These have developed some resistance out there. In fact, metalaxyl has a lot of resistance. So it's fairly expensive, and it's not all that effective. Now we've got Orondis that's registered, but like metalaxyl, it's this fungicide, and it can develop resistance issues if it's used too much. Okay, that's the big one, root rot. We've got invasive shothole borer, and that tends to be, it carries a fusarium fungus that can cause tree death in willows and in cottonwoods. It goes right to the heart of the tree. In the case of avocado, it tends to hit the outer branches, so you can prune it out. So we were really scared about this several years ago. It is an issue. It goes after sick avocados. It goes after water-stressed avocados, salinity-affected avocados. So this is another reason for making sure your irrigation system is working right. So we really do have drought-induced orchard problems. And these are either too much water on the top left, or not enough water, or too much water. This is asphyxiation that you can get with waterlogging. And you'll see leaf drop and fruit shriveling when you don't get enough water. Or you get, again, these Botryosphaerias, black streak, leaf blight, the salt and pepper. Botryosphaerias go to the fruit, Phytophthora fruit blight. So these are all induced by irrigation or poor irrigation. So with that, are there any questions, Leah Sousen?
Ben, there is one question from Curtis. Is Orondis more effective than phosphorus acid in root rot?
You know, I don't have enough experience with Orondis, but this is a good question for Dakota. Are there any other questions?
That's all that we have right now, Ben.
Okie dokie. Let's invite Dakota in to share her screen then.
Oh, if we want, Curtis just popped on with another question.
Okay.
He is asking, how often can you repeat trunk injections?
You know, trunk injections are the most effective way to get phosphorus acid into the tree. It goes straight to up into the canopy and then down into the roots. I've seen in New Zealand and Australia applications every year, or every month rather, you know, so you can really put the pedal to the metal. I've also seen trees defoliated because they put on too much. So, you know, the initial work that was done in California with trunk injections by Mike Coffey, it was basically a spring and fall application. So you're hitting the periods of growth when you're getting maximum root growth. So you really don't want to be putting this stuff on, you know, anytime after November. So November, December, January, February, March, you know, start thinking about injections in April, and maybe, you know, once in the spring and once in the fall. You know, the part of the problem with trunk injections is it's labor intensive. So if you're doing it yourself, it's no big deal, but maybe, but if you're hiring it done, it gets expensive.
Ben, we opened the spigot and now the questions are coming. Do you have a few more minutes? We have the question of going back and giving us a reminder of what rootstocks are good.
You know, just about anything that is sold, that's a clonal, the VCs that are coming out now have really good salt tolerance as well as Phytophthora resistance. But you know, Duke 7, as I said, is still a good rootstock. You know, it's tough. Toro Canyon is a great rootstock. We've had problems with Dusa in heavier soils in Ventura and Santa Barbara. If you keep them on the dry side, they'll do better. So I think it's learning to manage Dusa. It's probably the rootstock of choice down in San Diego on coarser soils.
Right. How about if Phytophthora is not a fungus, but a brown algae, how is it that fungicides are effective against it?
You know, that's what Dakota's going to talk about. But there's no, these fungicides do have an effect on the oomycetes, and that Phytophthora is an oomycete. But it doesn't work against Botryosphaeria, for example. So it's not very effective. These are not effective against most fungi. They've been selected for their ability to affect both the tree, but not affect the fungus.
Okay.
Excuse me, not affect the Phytophthora.
And is there long-term damage to branches through repeated injections?
You know, the avocado is tremendously capable of dealing with wounding. It's got a lot of buds that are latent, buried, and you know, I've seen, I don't know, 20 years worth of branch injections. You don't want to inject into the branch because of this possibility of damage that occurs. So in doing branch injections, it should be in concert with the pruning program. So, you know, after a few years, you're going to prune out those branches that you've injected into. So, but you know, it's amazing how rapidly avocados will heal themselves, you know, through this exuding this sap.
Okay. How about how far in decline can a tree recover from PRR?
From what?
From root rot.
Oh, from, you know, if you can see through the canopy, it's going to take you a long time to turn that baby around. So when you're starting to see the first signs of it and you start injections, you can turn it around within a year. If you can see through the canopy, it might take you several years to turn around, and probably be better to plant a new clonal rootstock.
All right, we've got 3 more questions. Do you think we have time for that, Ben?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Is there something you look for as to the timing to do an injection?
Again, you want to inject into a tree that has root growth going on. So, you know, basically, if you think of May through October, that's the period of when you're getting root growth. Most of this is going to be in the late spring, early summer, and late fall and late summer and early fall.
Okay, if Phytophthora is ubiquitous, does sanitation actually matter that much?
You know, much less so than it was before. But, you know, it keeps you alert. You know, sanitation, when we're talking about keeping animals out, it's just, you know, it's good husbandry. You know, maintaining a healthy orchard. You know, you're aware of you know, possibility of not just root rot, but these Botryosphaerias too.
Okay, I think we're down to the last one, and that is there any wood that one should not use for wood chip mulch?
Oh, you know, it's, boy, you sure don't want to introduce weeds. I've seen mulches brought in, you know, yard waste, and Bermuda grass gets spread all over, and that's a nightmare for an organic grower because there's no really good herbicides So, I wouldn't bring in palm because those dates are going to germinate and you're going to have a lot of palm trees, and maybe you want to sell palm trees. I don't know. Anything that has tomatoes, tomato seeds, I've seen tomatoes come in with mulch. So, you want to know the source of that mulch more than the species of tree. Okay, Dakota, take it.
Okay, let me try to share my screen here. Okay, can everybody see that? All right, feel free to stop me at any point if you're having a hard time hearing me or you want to ask a question during the presentation. My name is Dakota Camino. I am one of the Syngenta sales representatives in California. I cover past growables to San Diego, Riverside County, and Hawaii. So I do think I have a majority of the avocados in my territory. I do have a fair amount of citrus in my territory as well. So we're going to be mostly speaking to Southern California, Central Coast avocados and citrus. And I'm going to go over the three main treatment options that tend to be used in citrus and avocado. We're going to allude to citrus a little bit, even though we're focusing on avocado, because a lot of people who farm or consult for citrus also do so for avocado. We also have a fair amount of data for Orondis on citrus. We have some in avocado, but I wanted to show some overlapping similarities there as well. So again, my name is Dakota Camino. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me. So first I want to go over just a little bit about California citrus and avocado. So in California, all the citrus and avocado are primarily fresh market crops, and this requires them to be nearly perfect to be viable for sale. We are also one of the most regulated states in the most regulated nation, both economically and environmentally. So the sum of these points mean that we need the best quality fruit and highest yields in order to remain profitable. Let me go forward. Sorry about that. I'm having a delay, I think. Okay. So I also want to talk about why root health in permanent crops is so important. So with permanent crops, there's really no redo factor. You're pretty much stuck with what you have, whereas annual crops have the ability to be replanted in season or year after year. So you can learn from your mistakes. But like I said, in permanent crops, you're kind of stuck with what you have. If a Phytophthora infection exists, it only gets worse. There's no ability to redo. So lingering stressors will harm not only current but future yields as well, which affects return on investment and all other inputs in the field. Your roots are the foundation for growth, and compromises here will compound every aspect of growth and yield. Oftentimes, Phytophthora symptoms are overlooked or misidentified. So history of the grove is highly important. If not, testing is important. So why the resurgence in Phytophthora? I think Phytophthora has always been a problem, but I do think there's been more awareness spread around the issue in recent years. And I think this is due to new acreage expansion, planting after a crop, which is a harbor for Phytophthora, back-to-back plantings, a replant disease, moonscaping, and this is basically where all the organic matter has been removed from the field. And then current irrigation methods and poor water quality. Phytophthora does have the ability to move in water. There are studies that have shown that information. And so, and then, the current irrigation methods sometimes allow for salt buildup, and that will attribute to the Phytophthora symptoms. There are two major types of Phytophthora in permanent crops, and those are Phytophthora crown rot and Phytophthora root rot. So today we're going to be focusing on Phytophthora root rot. This represents an infection away from the crown and the lateral root systems. Symptoms will mimic both drought stress and nutrient deficiencies. So like I said, it's really important to know that you're dealing with Phytophthora. There is no fungicide that we're going to talk about today that will work unless it is Phytophthora. So I know that we have a fair amount of fusarium that is present, nematodes are present. It is important to know that you have Phytophthora in order to expect these materials to work. Your symptoms for Phytophthora will mimic both will show leaf cupping and marginal burn. But those are also symptoms of nutrient deficiencies, salt deficiencies, water issues. And so confirmation that you have Phytophthora is important. Your trees can limb through multiple seasons of decline. Stunted trees are often very common, but again, visual symptoms are often overlooked or misidentified. Yield reduction is often the only sign and can be very slow to take effect. So I do want to add one more note here. Trees don't die from Phytophthora. Phytophthora creates an environment where the trees are unable to fight off other stressors and infections. We did talk about fusarium, nematodes, water issues, nutrient issues. When your trees are unhealthy or compromised by Phytophthora, it reduces their ability to fight off those other infections. And that's typically how you end up with tree loss. So one of the most common materials used for treatment of Phytophthora root rot that I'm aware of is phosphite. Phosphite is usually always given as a treatment option, and that can be applied foliar or through the soil. There's a couple issues with using just phosphite alone. One of them is that uptake can be tough when the root system is already compromised. So I have heard a lot about tree injections or trunk injections, and that's because your root system is compromised and you can't get the material up into a compromised root system. So soil applied methods are typically difficult to get any kind of control with because of that. Air blast or helicopter spraying is very inefficient also, with only 5 to 15% of the mixed product actually hitting the targeted area. However, phosphite works both directly and indirectly. It affects lesion size and expansion, but there's no known direct impact on stopping actual germination or mycelia growth. It also boosts natural defenses through a fertility-based pathway. Then you have Ridamil Gold. I'm going to breeze through Ridamil Gold very quickly so we can get to Orondis. But with every product, there are misconceptions, and soil applied products are probably the worst. Ridamil Gold is and does protect the roots from the inside out. It has some but very little curative activity, and it's very systemic. So it makes its way up the plant, but not so much down the plant. This is similar to what we would kind of compare to a vaccine. Ridamil will protect those new fine feeder roots so that the infection cannot get into the new fine feeder roots. But as you have new roots expanding, you have parts of the roots that need to be retreated. With any of these materials, programs are very important. When you apply Ridamil through the soil, it has an extremely high affinity to root tissue. So you apply the material, it makes its way into the roots. And then it pretty much is gone after that. Ridamil is not something that is going to stick around the soil for a long period of time. It is extremely water soluble, but that's okay because you just need to protect the new fine feeder roots. So like I said, it's absorbed by the roots, builds this wall of protection, and then moves systemically within the plant. Ridamil will not undo damage that has already been done. Neither will Ridamil and neither will phosphite. The goal with Phytophthora is treating for Phytophthora is to attempt to outgrow the infection, which is why programs are extremely necessary. Your timing and rate when using Ridamil Gold SL specifically on citrus and avocado for your root rot treatments will be to time the applications around a root flush. There's no wrong time to apply for Phytophthora, there's just far more efficient times. And by applying at a root flush, this is going to give you the longest protection of fine feeder roots. So when you're chemigating with Ridamil Gold SL through drip or micro sprinklers, apply 1 pint per acre for small infections, 2 pints for severe. I will say that most who are utilizing Ridamil are going to be using 1 pint per acre in that early spring root flush, along with another pint at that early fall root flush. So you want to apply Ridamil when you have the most fine feeder roots present, because the goal is to protect those new fine feeder roots. It's not going to be something that's going to sit around the soil for a long period of time waiting for those roots to grow into the treated environment. You have to apply to the roots. The rate has been trialed and tested. So that 1 pint per acre requires no wet calculation area. So you don't need to band. That rate is your banded rate. With Ridamil also, you want to inject towards the end of your irrigation set. It's a very good water soluble product and very mobile in the soil. So typically what I like to say is if you have a 9-hour irrigation set, you want to inject towards the last third of that set. I'm using 9 for simple math. So irrigate for 6 hours, inject your Ridamil in the last third of that set, get it incorporated a little bit, and then shut the water off. Usually you want no more than 4 hours of water behind this product. I'm going to go over a little bit of data on how Ridamil has been known to create a healthier root environment and give you a greater root mass. And greater root masses or healthier root masses are going to attribute to better yield, better quality growing environments. And so here we had young trees that were that we looked at in a root box study, and they were inoculated with Phytophthora in August 2012. They were treated with Ridamil at 1 pint per acre along with platinum at 3.5 ounces per acre. We don't use a lot of platinum in our areas because we use a lot of Actara, and you can't use Actara if you use platinum, which is a soil applied thiamethoxam. So we just use platinum here to evaluate a synergistic relationship between the two products. The application dates were September 6th and April 4th. So this kind of goes, September 6th and December 19th, evaluated on April 4th. So this kind of goes back to why programs are necessary. What we're going to see here is that there was a 16% increase in rootstock diameter and a 31% increase above graft diameter. It's also attributed to a 71% increase in overall tree weight. So you do see quite a bit of a growth response when treating with Ridamil for Phytophthora specifically. This is a side-by-side of citrus that is the same age, same block, and I'll show you the wider range picture here shortly. But you have untreated trees to the right. No Ridamil Gold SL was used on these trees. This image was taken 3 weeks after the treatment of the trees that were treated. And to the left, you see the trees that were treated at 1 pint per acre with Ridamil Gold SL, also evaluated 3 weeks after treatment. Here is the look at the overall, this row where you see treated versus untreated. So to the left, you have untreated. To the right, you have treated. Again, trees planted the exact same time. The only difference is the addition of Ridamil Gold SL here at 1 pint per acre. So you see quite a bit more overall canopy growth on the trees to the right than you do on the left. So I'm going to talk about almonds only very briefly because I think it's important to show what treating for Phytophthora can actually do. So I think we spend a lot of time, labor, manpower, which all attributes to cost, replanting and trying to get new trees established. I understand that these fungicides that we have that are actually protecting against actual infection are not quite as cost efficient at a glance when you're comparing it to something like phosphite. However, it is significantly different when you incorporate those materials. This was a young almond block that was planted in 2013. They did have initial Phytophthora symptoms in late 2013. These were 2 blocks planted side by side. The grower just wanted to try Ridamil on one side because it is a product that is a little bit more expensive than applying phosphites. But he was using phosphites and there was no slowing of the infection seen. So he started to use Ridamil Gold SL in the first part of March 2014, then treated at 1 pint per acre every application, 1 time per year until the last year where he went out twice. Both blocks were comprised of the same varieties. They were planted on the same planting dates. So same age, everything was exactly the same except for the addition of Ridamil Gold SL. So everything red is dead. All of the yellow or light green are replants, and then the green trees are healthy. So this was the first evaluation taken in April 2014, which is just shortly after that March 2014 application. This is September 2014. You see a little bit less dead trees, a little bit fewer replants, and more an overall healthier growth. And by the last application, a much cleaner environment to this almond orchard. Far less replants, far less dead trees. And so it is something that is not only visually significant, but when you go to harvest, I'll explain what this actually means in almond speak. There was a 241-pound difference in the non-parels and a 300-pound difference in the Monterey. So 2 different varieties of almond trees, which means in almond speak these applications paid for themselves almost 3 times over. I show this slide often because I don't have the same data in citrus, but it is something that a lot of people who use Ridamil understand, that you do see almost an instantaneous perk up, not only after you apply Ridamil, but you do see overall improved vigor when you can stay on a program. So these treatments are not quite as cost efficient as what we're used to from a glance, but over time they pay for themselves over and over and over again. Ben talked about Botchosphera a little bit. I wanted to show this slide because, again, I think it's important to stay on a program. And I wanted to demonstrate how other diseases or other pest pressures will look even worse when you have a Phytophthora infection. So the objective of this study was to promote Riddermill Gold SL for rapid establishment and improve root health in avocado trees. The treatments were untreated, or you had Riddermill Gold SL at 1 pint per acre in the spring and fall. So this was a Haas avocado orchard that was treated 2 times, once on May 16th and once on August 27th in the same year, with Riddermill Gold at 1 pint per acre. And this was rated on a scale of 0 to 5. 0 was a healthy tree and 5 was a dead tree. So here we see that over time, 2 applications were made. Then there was evaluations taken 31 days after application 1, all the way up to 58 days after application 2. So we started off with the untreated control at about a 3, and it ended up at a 2.9. So pretty much no improvement there without the incorporation of Riddermill Gold SL. On the treated trees, you started off at about a 3. And ended up at about a 1.8. If you remember, 0 is a healthy tree. So there was a significant improvement, almost a 50% improvement just in that 5 to 6 month study in overall tree health. Now, what you don't see is completely improved fruit vigor in the first year, first 2 applications within that particular year. And the reason why is because the Phytophthora infections don't show up overnight. Usually by the time they're caught or you begin treating for them, this pathogen has been around for a while, and it will take a while to outgrow the infection. There is no material available that is going to completely eradicate this issue. All these materials that are available to treat for Phytophthora are treating from future infections of the new roots. And so it's really important to stay on a program, because you will start to notice overall yield improvements, overall quality of fruit as time goes on. Usually when you begin applying these materials, your fruit set has already been determined. So you really start to notice the improvements by the following year. So the conclusions here were, while no significant changes were noted in the untreated trees, the Riddermill Gold SL trees showed marked improvements in vigor on the 4th and 5th ratings. And those 4th and 5th ratings were taken after treatment too. So programs are really important when you're using Riddermill Gold SL and even Orondis. So I'll move on to Orondis as we kind of close up here. Orondis is our new, Syngenta's new fungicide for control of root rot in citrus and avocado. We have also got registrations on tree nuts, which does include almonds, pistachios, and then there's a whole tropical fruits registration as well. So that's important to our counterparts in Hawaii. But this is a picture I'm going to start off with when you're of a grower who used Orondis and didn't want to treat his whole grove right off the bat. So he treated just that light green strip in the middle. This is a picture taken in Kern County. They like around an acre in Kern County. Orondis comes in quarts, it's a 32-ounce pack size. And the valley growers like to use a 6.4 ounce rate so that they can get a straight 5 acres to the quart. So he treated just the light green strip here, and he did this to just kind of trial it out. And this picture was taken 60 days after treatment at 6.4 ounces per acre. There was no other changes other than the addition of Orondis in that light green strip. So 60 days later, you see all new flush just in that strip relative to the untreated on both sides of that strip. So Orondis is available for control of brown rot or root rot in citrus, and is also now available for root rot in avocado. We have a lot of industry support from industry leaders like Jim Cranny and Jim Atascavage, calling this the most active Phytophthora material we've ever seen. MRLs are established for most major export countries. And this is a very dynamic product in that it can be applied for both soil and foliar uses in citrus, or solving our issues with our cinnamomum and avocado. So a little bit about the product. The active ingredient in Orondis is oxythiopiperine. This is a brand new active ingredient and a brand new mode of action for these markets. So FRAC 49, there is no other FRAC 49 for these markets. It is very, very, very systemic. So it has xylem movement. It is a truly xylem mobile product. So it's highly effective for fungicide, for omycete diseases. And so Ben talked a little bit about omycete specific materials, and this truly is an omycete specific material here. It is omycete specific, but Phytophthora omycete, being that it's super narrow spectrum, only going to give you control of root rot and brown rot, which makes it safe for your microorganisms or your beneficials that you're adding to the soil. So this material targets the oxysterol binding proteins that are essential for fungal development. There is no cross resistance at this time. And so we really encourage everybody who uses Orondis to be good stewards of the product and make sure you're rotating as necessary. It inhibits all stages of the fungal life cycle, as shown in the symbol to the left. So what this material does differently than say Ridamil Gold SL is that it eradicates soil populations of Phytophthora. So whereas Ridamil Gold SL serves as kind of a protectant of those new fine feeder roots, serving kind of similar to a vaccine, this material, Orondis, is sticking around in the soil. So as your new root flush happens, your roots are growing into cleaner soil. This is showing you how effective Orondis is at very, very low use rates. So this picture was taken by my iPhone back in, I think, 2016. So it was a little bit poor quality picture. So bear with this photo here, but this was showing you milligrams of active ingredient per liter. So you see susceptible strains of Phytophthora to mefenoxam versus resistant strains of Phytophthora to mefenoxam, and how they're holding it up against oxythiopyperlin, which is Orondis. So you have everything up to about a 1/100th of a milligram active ingredient, 110,000th milligram active ingredient per liter, giving you efficacy all the way across the board at extremely low use rates. A little bit on citrus. Again, you can use this product for root rot or brown rot. If you use it for brown rot foliarly, you cannot use it for root rot through the soil. Your rate range for root rot in both avocados and citrus is going to be 4.8 to 9.6 ounces per acre. Under no circumstance would I ever recommend going less than 4.8 ounces per acre. You want this material to be able to stick around for some time, and using it, that 4.8 to 9.6 ounce range is kind of that sweet spot for prolonged control. So again, this product comes in quarts. Your registered pests are brown rot in citrus or root rot in both citrus and avocado. Your PHI is going to be 0 days in citrus with a 30-day PHI in avocado, and your REI is 4 hours. So this gives a lot of flexibility to get back into the groves and get working again if you need to. So no prolonged REI there. Adjuvants are permitted, but not all have been tested. So please talk to your consultants or give me a call and we can talk about any adjuvants that you're curious at looking at with this product. There are some restrictions with this product, but the most notable that we'll talk about today, always refer to the labels for full instructions and restrictions. But the most important restriction we're going to talk about today is no more than 2 back-to-back applications may be made with this product through the soil before you rotate to another mode of action. And so you cannot use Orondis with nothing to break it up in the middle. So that leaves us with Ridamil Gold SL. There may be some other fungicides that you can rotate with, but it's very important to rotate away from this material after 2 back-to-back applications. Again, in citrus, you're able to use this product for brown rot, and it is showing some significant brown rot control improvements over copper and lime, for example. We now have Revis approved, and so if you use Revis for brown rot in citrus, that gives you the flexibility to use Orondis for root rot. Instead of worrying about whether you're going to use Orondis for brown rot or root rot in citrus. But moving on to root rot timings and rates with Orondis in citrus and avocado. So again, you really want to stay between that 4.8 and 9.6 ounce per acre range. My recommendation is to use 4.8 ounces per acre applied every 6 months, or 9.6 fluid ounces per acre applied every 365 days. I would look at this product as about an ounce. Every ounce is going to give you about a month and a quarter of control. And so you can play around with the rates if you want to, but my recommendation is to use 4.8 fluid ounces per acre applied every 6 months, or 9.6 applied every 365 days. Again, initially, you may look at this product and think, well, this is not nearly as cost efficient as phosphites. However, when you look at the length of control with this product, and it is the only product that I'd be willing to put a day of control on, this is far more cost effective than the amount of time and labor that it takes to apply 2 to 3 applications of phosphite per year. The timing here is there is no wrong time apply, just like Britomil, there's just more efficient times to apply. You have a little bit more flexibility of application timing with this product because it will remain stable in the soil for a little bit longer than other alternatives. But you want to make sure to apply at or just before a major root flush timing. You want this material to be around when you have that major root flush coming through. So how you apply is going to be just like Britomil. You're going to apply through the drip or micro sprinklers only. If you have flood irrigation methods still around, I don't think this is the best material for you. I think I would go with Britomil Gold SL instead. You need a fair amount of water to get this material incorporated, and flood irrigation methods won't do what you need it to do in order to get it incorporated. It's important to make sure that you saturate the soil a little bit before applying or injecting Orondis. And then you usually want to inject Orondis to where you have about 8 to 12 hours of water behind it. In avocados, you can probably swing about 6 hours of water to about 10 hours of water, but I would not go less than 6 hours of actual incorporation of the material under any circumstance. Some water conditioners have been known to help incorporate the material a little further, but this material is not nearly as water soluble as Britomil Gold SL and does require a fair amount of water to get incorporated, even with avocados that tend to have shallower root systems that are very surface oriented. Even in some of the leaf litter, you do need a fair amount of water to get it incorporated into the full root zone. So we talked about how Orondis sticks around the soil so that as your roots begin to grow, they're growing into cleaner soil. And so what I wanted to demonstrate here was the different rates of Orondis, 4.8 and 9.6, and how long it is eradicating the propagules in the soils. These applications or these samples were taken initially right after a treatment, and then 6 months after that first sample. And so what you're noticing here at 4.8 and 9.6 ounces per acre is you're getting the same initial control of Phytophthora. However, what you're not seeing here is that 9.6 lasts quite a bit longer than 4.8 ounces per acre. And so this is showing you leveled propagule counts. As you can see, in not every case is it going to fully eradicate every single propagule in the soil, but it will take them down to levels that we haven't really seen before for a prolonged period of time. Now we have the material on avocados. So again, rate here is 4.8 to 9.6 ounces per acre. This will never be a one and done application. Programs are so necessary in order to outgrow the actual infections. There is no silver bullet for Phytophthora. It is all about outgrowing the problem. Depending on if you have pre-existing containers of Orondis, you may not have avocado listed on your containers. In that case, you need the supplemental labeling, which I have available. Your consultants likely have this supplemental labeling available, but if you need it, feel free to reach out to myself or your consultants and we can get it sent over to you. You'll need this if you do not have avocado on the physical labels on the containers you have on hand. So this is going to show you, your overall incidence of disease pressure on tolerant versus susceptible rootstocks. We talked about how rootstocks are helping combat a Phytophthora issue in avocados. And tolerant does not mean non-susceptible. It just means less susceptible than susceptible rootstocks. And so what we have here is demonstration of how Orondis at the equivalent of 9.6 ounces per acre holds up against phosphites, Britomil Gold SL. I don't know if Presidio is available, but other soil applieds for root rot control. And you have Orondis here holding your incidence down significantly more greater than other alternatives. And so it is a pretty unique material. This is showing an overall view of Britomil Gold SL at the equivalent of 4.8 and 9.6 ounces versus phosphites and Britomil Gold SL. And so what I think is important to note here is we know that Britomil Gold SL is going to give you improved growth response pretty initially, or pretty close to after the initial application of the product. Orondis will do that, but it needs time to do that. So Ridimil does provide some kind of a growth response. Orondis will do that as your roots begin to develop a healthier environment. So what the main thing we want to notice here is that Orondis is holding the propagule counts at an all-time low relative to phosphites and Ridimil Gold SL, and your root rot incidence is also significantly reduced. So your root dry weight, your plant shoot dry weight, your height at the time of sampling, your shoot dry weight and your root dry weight are going to improve over time, but they need more than just a few months after application to do so. So where this is really going to shine is actually doing its job to reduce Cinnamomi propagules in the soil and overall root rot incidence. Now, all of that to say, that doesn't mean stop using phosphite. That doesn't mean stop using Ridimil Gold. You need a program. And so this slide, if you need it, take a picture of it. I can't send this out, but this is Orondis versus Ridimil versus phosphite. You have a group 49 versus a group 4 versus a group 33. They all do different things, but there are things that they do not do. So what Orondis won't do is, as well as Ridimil, is you won't get any kind of a fertilizer addition despite demonstrated plant benefit. It will not provide, Orondis will not provide a growth response like Ridimil does. Initially, it happens over time. And Orondis will not provide any type of Pythium control whatsoever. So again, omycete specific, but Phytophthora omycete specific. It doesn't move very well in the soil, hence why you need quite a bit of water to get the material incorporated. Ridimil Gold SL will not kill all pathogen spores in the soil like Orondis will, and it will not completely stop an infection. Whereas phosphite won't reduce any soil populations in the soil, and it won't move very well in the soil or provide total infection. And so what these materials do is make up for what others lack, which is why a program is very necessary. They work differently, and for the most complete defense, 2 of the 3 are at least needed. So if any of the listed 3 are not used and used correctly, along with proper agronomics, which is pivotal, you have kind of like a 2-legged stool effect. So you're going to not have complete stability when you don't have a solid rotation. And so I suggest using a group 4 and or group 49 and rotate with your group 33s like your phosphites. So if nobody has any questions, that is the end of my presentation for today.
We do have some questions, Dakota. Are you ready to field some of these?
I'm ready, I think.
Great. So the question arose, what formulations do you recommend? There seem to be many.
So I think that is a question regarding which Orondis am I using, and yes, there are many. So in California, we have 4 different types of Orondises registered, but they're for different crops. For citrus and avocado, you're looking at Orondis. It's just straight Orondis. It is the only one that comes in a quart package size. So you have Orondis Ultra, Orondis Opti, Orondis Gold. Do not look at those products. Those are not for us in citrus and avocado. Just Orondis all by itself, straight oxythiopyprolin. It's the only straight Orondis available.
Great. And another question, will Orondis wash out of soil if you irrigate 12 hours weekly?
No. So with this material, it's pretty, you need to set it at application. And then after that, it sets and it really doesn't move at all. So that should be fine.
Okay. And can these products be mixed with other products like zinc or iron?
Yes. Orondis is pretty safe. You really shouldn't have any issues with a lot of materials. The only material I would recommend staying away from, and I don't have any firsthand experience with Orondis and CAN 17 specifically, but Ridimil does not mix well with CAN 17. So because of that, I would stay away from any kind of calcium-like product unless you have firsthand experience. And so Ridimil and a CAN 17 will cause a brick in the drip line, which is why I would recommend not mixing those 2 together. If you want to inject them in the same set, feel free. Just make sure you flush the lines out really good between the injections.
All right. And how about how it works in a highly mulched orchard?
So mulch creates an additional layer between the application and the soil typically. In avocados, I don't expect that to change how much water you're going to need to put behind the material to get it injected because, like I said, avocados roots tend to be so surface oriented. A lot of those roots tend to be in the leaf litter or tend to be in the mulch. And so I would expect there to be consistency between how long you irrigate to incorporate Orondis and citrus versus avocado.
Great. And how about the shelf life? Can you tell us about that?
So usually Syngenta stands behind a 3-year shelf life. I would say if it's kept at in a proper storage facility with no extreme temperatures being freezing or too hot, it'll probably be okay for a prolonged period of time, but Syngenta will stand behind a product shelf life for 3 years.
Okay. And can it be applied as a manual soil drench along with irrigation?
I would prefer it doesn't. I think it's far more efficient to apply just through your drip or micro sprinklers, but drenches are permitted and they are labeled.
Okay. And when using Orondis, how long is the activity in the soil? And that it may be systemic, is there also protection from within the roots?
So it is not systemic enough to make its way into the foliar part of the trees and offer you any kind of protection. And I'm assuming that question might have something to do with brown rot. So when you're applying to the soil for root rot, you're not going to get brown rot control, and vice versa. Now we talked about how long its residual tends to be in the soil. I won't guarantee that you're going to get 365 days of control, but I'm fairly confident you will at 9.6 ounces per acre. We don't get a lot of rain in this area. Unless it starts raining like it does in Washington, we'll start looking at how long it's lasting. But in most circumstances, in all different soil types up and down the state, when this material is applied correctly, being that you apply to saturated soil, you incorporated it with enough water after application, I would say about an ounce of Orondis is good for about a month and 10 days of control is typically what we're observing in a lot of our data. And so that's why I recommend that 4.8 ounces every 6 months or your 9.6 ounce rate every 365 days. But a program is necessary.
Okay, and then I'm not super clear on this one, but it says mix either with KTS. Does that make sense to you?
I think that they're referring to
you could send them
to some other fertilizers there, but I'm not sure.
KTS is potassium thiosulfate.
Okay, yeah. I'm okay with that. I mean, like I said, there's not everything that we haven't tried everything, but I'm okay with most fertilizers or soil amendments. Again, I would just stay within the calcium type products to make sure that you don't have any, and it's not a phyto issue. It is simply an incompatibility issue. So I think the product should be okay. I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that mix in particular, but I think that it's probably okay.
Okay, do you still have a testing program, and is non-fungicide label phosphorus acid considered a breakup? And I'm going to tack this on to, is Orondis registered for P. citricola parasitica in soil apps citrus? All I saw was for brown rot foliar.
Okay, so let me try to break this question up. So the first part of this question was, one more time, sorry.
Yeah, the first part was, do you have a testing program?
So Syngenta does have a testing program. It is called the Soil Pathogen Assessment Program. We call it the SPA program for short. That opens up in March typically. It has to be conventional crop that either Orondis or Rhodamil is registered on. Other than that, it's a completely free program. You don't have to use our products afterwards. We go out, we take a sample of the field, send it into a third-party lab called Nematodes Inc. They get us the results and we send you the results, and you can choose to treat or not afterwards. So yes, that is available. We are going to reduce the amount of samples that we're going to take this year. Eventually this program will go away. But this year is one of the last years that we will have it, and that will open up in March. So the way that works is contact your consultant. They'll contact me, and we'll get someone out to your field to get it sampled and get you your results. The the second part of this question. What was that one?
Sure. Okay. Is the non-fungicide label phosphoric acid considered a breakup, and is Orondis registered? Well, maybe start with that.
I wouldn't consider it a breakup. Some people do. The EU looks at it as a fungicide from time to time. That's why they call it a group 33. If you're asking me seriously if that's a breakup, I would not suggest that as a breakup. I think you need a true mode of action in there to break up the two back-to-back applications of Ritamil. Orondis.
Okay. And is it registered for P. citricola / parasitica in soil apps? Citrus.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes. So cinnamomum for avocados. And this material is active on a lot of different types of Phytophthora. There's over 300 and something strains of Phytophthora, and it's active on all of them. I'm pretty sure. We just have data on those main citrus and avocado strains because that's what we care about here in California.
Okay, and then next one is Orondis has been spoken about as an eradicator. However, the label states it's a suppressant. And which is it?
Well, we saw the data where we showed that it was leveling propagules to very, very low levels. In many situations, I have seen it eradicate soil populations. In some cases, I haven't seen it eradicate every single bit of Phytophthora. So it works similarly to an eradicant in that it is actually killing propagules in the soil. But the reason why our label likely doesn't say eradicant is because in not every case is it eradicating every bit of Phytophthora within the soil itself, although it is keeping them at levels that are much lower than what our treatment thresholds require. So we have Ritamil that is more fungistatic. It protects new fine feeder roots from becoming infected and then it outgrows the material, whereas Orondis is that stable material in the soil that is eradicating soil populations. But again, Phytophthora can always be reintroduced to the soil.
Okay, if used at 9.6 ounces per acre, where its effectiveness lasts for a year, do you reapply the following year at the same amount?
I would. That's how I would recommend. I would recommend staying on a consistent program where you're not allowing those infections to rebuild in the soil, and I give a 365-day time frame as that is the average amount of time that we're seeing before this material may start to break at that 9.6 ounce rate. But those are the programs that I recommend staying on. And so, yes, I would not recommend waiting longer than that year time frame before retreating, because you do want to avoid situations where you're reintroducing Phytophthora back into the soil, which happens through equipment, water, other infected trees, replants. So there's always a means for reintroduction, which is why programs are very necessary to continue to protect new fine feeder roots and outgrow the problem.
Great. How about if you can use it on trees that are about 2 to 3 years old?
Orondis has no crop age restriction. You can use this to brand new trees, but for both avocados and citrus, there is no need to wait 2 to 3 years before you apply this material.
How about plans for an organic solution comparable to Orondis?
So I'm sure that an organic solution comparable to Orondis would be ideal for those that are farming organic. This is a very safe material overall, but an organic material requires certain kinds of protocols, being that they cannot be a synthetically derived material, which this material is. I don't know that we will see anytime soon a material that works to the same caliber for organic. I'm sure it's got to be in the works somewhere, but as it stands, there's probably nothing in the near future for Orondis level control in organic.
Okay. How about, can one expect that with good practices, Orondis would eventually be no longer needed with avocado root rot?
Sure. Sure. So like I said, Phytophthora can always be reintroduced to the soil. I think that it is not a commonly utilized practice to stay on a program to outgrow the infection, which like I mentioned is necessary. You're not going to make a one and done application, but if you want to stay on a program for, 2 years and take a year off and then revert back to treatment, I think that should be fine, but you need to get that initial root system under control first. And so I don't think that it'll, just to say you can stop using it forever will be an option. But if you want to treat for a couple of years, take a year off, and then come back to treatment, that'll probably be good. You could probably get away with that. So where you're not treating on that consistent annual cycle for after the first couple of years, but you do need to make sure that you're getting you've outgrown the infection enough before you can take that break. But like I said, until we have a way to eradicate this kind of pathogen from spreading with equipment from the nursery through our water, which, like I said, we do have clear information that it is spreading through the water, you're always going to have environments where the pathogen is reintroduced. So I think the only thing that we can do is maintain what we have control of, and that is to continue to remain on some kind of a program. So take an aggressive program in the beginning, and then take a year off if you would like to, but I don't think that I can say with confidence you'll never need to retreat again.
Okay, and then we have one attendee asking if you could go over the chemigation equipment requirements. Apologies if I've pronounced that wrong.
No, I think you pronounced it perfectly well. Everybody's irrigation equipment is different. I mean, what we want to make sure we have here is a drip or micro sprinkler irrigation system. I think that question is a little bit vague, and that I'm not sure what kind of irrigation setup they have. But again, feel free to contact me or your consultant, and we can go over that for your individualized farming operation. But typically, we want drip or micro sprinkler only. The label says drip or micro sprinkler only. I know that there are some environments where we have flood. I would not recommend this product through flood. If you need to utilize a material for flood irrigation methods, use a Riddermill Gold SL. It'll move better, and it'll give you the control that you need for a program approach. You want to make sure you're saturating the soil. Let's say that you inject this material and it takes about 2 hours for it to fully inject and clear up the lines, and then run your irrigation for about 8 hours after that. And in most situations, because it does take every irrigation system is going to have a floor that it meets before it reaches ET. So you're going to get the proper application on for most irrigation systems if you allow your water to run behind the material for about 8 hours.
And then I think this is chiming into that conversation, but we just had something pop up that says it can't be connected to your house water. And it sounds like a statement, but maybe a question.
You need a backflow preventer on your irrigation lines. And I'm not sure that I'm understanding that question completely. I mean, if your house water is connected to your well water, many people inject with that kind of setup all the time, but they have to have something that prevents any kind of backflow, because you certainly do not want chemical getting into your home water.
Okay. How about what is Revis in your portfolio? Is that a brown rot option?
Revis has been around for quite some time. Revis is mandipropamid. That is a group 40. It has been used in vegetables to control downy mildew for years, and it has recently been approved for use in citrus for brown rot specifically. And so you're going to use that material 8 ounces per acre. Jim Cranny and Jemetta Scavage have also put their stamp of approval on that material. It is approved for use in the GAPS protocol. And both Orondis or oxalipiperlin and mandipropamid, which is Revis, are providing what they would consider industry-leading control of brown rot. So if you choose to use Revis for brown rot control, that does not prohibit you from using Orondis for a soil-applied root rot control in citrus. Whereas if you were to use Orondis as a foliar brown rot control, you cannot use Orondis through the soil within 365 days and vice versa. It has to be one application method or the other in citrus, specifically when utilizing Orondis.
Okay, and is Syngenta the only supplier of oxalipiperlin in the US?
Syngenta is the only manufacturer of oxalipiperlin in the US. The material is bought through our retailers and distributors and sold to end users that way. Syngenta does not sell grower direct. We sell through our distributors and retailers. And so those will vary depending on your location. But yes, Syngenta is the only manufacturer of oxalipiperlin. It is fully patent protected. There are no legal generics available.
Okay. And how about where is it manufactured?
That's a good question. I would assume China, but I'd have to get back to you guys on that one. It could be China, Germany, and it could be Georgia. But let me find out. I'm not sure where we're getting Orondis from. We are now. What I will say to that is, we bought oxythiopyprilin. Syngenta purchased oxythiopyprilin from DuPont, who was the original manufacturer of Orondis. We bought it before it ever came to market, and we are required to get a 6-month lead time from Corteva on how much active ingredient we need, because we do source our active ingredient from Corteva. That being said, we talked about how almonds, pistachios, and other tree nuts are now registered. There are over 1 million acres of tree nuts in California. I am highly, highly, highly encouraging anybody who needs Orondis for avocado or citrus to order their needs for the year as soon as possible. Everybody is kind of planning on using this material around the same time, and I am fairly confident that we will be fighting amongst ourselves for product. I can't guarantee that you're going to get the product that you need if you don't get it now.
Okay, I'm going to move over to our chat where there are a couple of questions over here as well. Can you still use phosphite in the fall after applying either material in the spring? And maybe, I'm sorry, that might have popped up during Ben's and I didn't notice it.
I'll take it just in case, and then Ben can chime in, of course. Yes, you can. And what I would recommend with using either Iridomil or Orondis is treat with those materials first. And the reason why is because we talked about a compromised root system. You're not going to get your phosphites to get into a root system the way that you need it to if it is a compromised root system. So when you use a protectant or something that is creating an overall healthier root system by protecting him from becoming infected with Orondis or Iridomil, then your phosphites and other soil applieds can make their way into the root system like you want them to. So I would recommend making sure you're getting a healthier foundation in your roots first, making sure you're protecting those new fine feeder roots from becoming infected so that they can take your phosphites into their root system.
Okay, and how about whether you have it available in Peru?
I'll look. I'm not sure about that either. What I'll do is I'll send Ben a follow-up on where we're manufacturing Orondis specifically, or where we're sourcing Orondis specifically, and if we have it in Peru. I'm fairly confident we would. Syngenta is a global company. It might not be under the name Orondis. It might be under a different brand name. But if you look up oxythiopyprilin Peru, likely it'll come up. But nonetheless, I'll get back to Ben on that, and he can send out some follow-up for some of these questions that we didn't get answered today.
Okay, thank you. Wow, that was, you are an incredible wealth of knowledge.
You're always learning, and these are questions that have come up many, many times over the past few years, and so I'm just fortunate to have heard some of these questions before. There's always things I won't know, but I promise to always follow up where I can.
Great, thank you. And one more popped in. Are there any MRL issues?
So for most major export countries, we do have MRLs established. There are some countries where we don't. That being said, I've never known this product to have significant residue issues. There was a study done by Dr. Jametta Scavage, where he sampled fruit that was applied foliarly with Orondis. I think it was about 10 days or so before harvest. Then they harvested that fruit, ran it through the packing line, and in almost every situation, everything was either non-detect or at 0.01 parts per million. So you have very, very low amounts of active ingredient that are just extremely active. And so MRL issues is a little broad. I would need to know which countries you're referring to specifically, but for most major export countries, there should not be an issue.
Okay, and then forgive me if I asked this one already, but it's lingering here, and I think you did go over it, but is Orondis more effective than phosphorus acid in root rot?
Like I said, they're two completely different materials in a sense. I do not want you guys to stop using phosphites. I think that they have their own plant benefit that they add, but if we're talking propagule to propagule, phosphite versus Orondis, phosphites don't work on propagules directly to my knowledge. Orondis does. Orondis works on eradicating those propagules versus phosphite that doesn't do that specifically. But what phosphite does do is give you that fertilizer amendment. It does give a plant health response. You kind of think of it as, you know, when we're not feeling well, when we have a cold or the flu, we might take some Dayquil or something to help us get through our day, but we're not sick. It's just helping us function a little bit better to get through our stressors throughout the day. Ridamil is kind of like a vaccine, like we talked about, where it's protecting those new fine feeder roots from becoming infected. We might get a flu shot to protect us from becoming a little bit less susceptible to getting the flu. Doesn't mean we can't get it. We're just less susceptible to getting it. And Orondis is kind of like a heavy duty Lysol. If you could keep a Lysol bubble around you all day long for a prolonged period of time, that is kind of what Orondis can do when applied correctly. So again, I'm using real life in, you know, situations for people versus trees. So don't take that literally, but that's just some examples of how you can kind of differentiate the three. They work differently, but they work effectively. So I wouldn't compare phosphite to Orondis. I would use them interchangeably, you know, in a program and almost look to complement each other in a way.
Okay, fantastic. And I think we are done with questions. Is there anyone else? If there's anyone else who wants to chime in with any questions, we still have a few minutes. I think we're working on getting the CEU forms posted for credit there. And I will turn this all back over to Ben.
Oh, well, I guess Sosin's going to post the exam in the chat. So I'd like to thank Dakota. Thank you, Dakota.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Good show. So our next meeting is going to be on vertebrate control, and that's going to be in April. So we'll see you all then. Okay. So we'll leave you. Okay. Yeah, Sosin's posted. So I guess the meeting is over. You can all go back to work. Thank you.